Welcome to another WDCE Loud Rock interview series. I am your shepherd. This show is the Friday Funeral, and we're here with Geordy from the Crown Remnant. How you doing, sir?
Dude, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We are happy to have you. This new record. So
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to hear it yet because I haven't requested the Holics link, but I've heard one single, The Inferno. Riff-wise, to my ear, it sounds faster than a lot of the stuff that was on the Wicked King Part 1. Would you say that that's a consistent theme, or is it just something particular to that song?
You know, it's kind of interesting because what we do a lot of is kind of we do either metric modulation or tempo changes or whatever it is. So for a couple of songs, yes, we do purely just factually go to like faster tempos. We have not had a song that went over, I think, like 165, 170 BPM on part 1. And on part 2, we go all the way up to, I think it's 200 BPM. So from that standpoint, absolutely. And we're just playing a lot more crazy 16 notes and all that stuff. So it gets a little crazier sounding even if it's a similar tempo.
Do you think that there's anything that you have to change for your vocal style to factor in with faster songs?
Yeah, I got to learn to breathe better. That's for sure. Because it's one thing if you're going to a song that's kind of slow, easy to do. You have room in between vocal takes, and it's another thing when you got a song like this where it's like breakneck speed all the time, and you got to know like if I don't breathe now, I'm gonna pass out. So you definitely have to be able to kind of think in terms of can I do this live without knocking myself out because I couldn't breathe for like a minute and a half.
Now, when you're singing with a faster song, or writing, rather, vocals with a faster song, do you prefer to do, like, longer, drawn-out notes that, like, atmospherically go over the flow, or do you like to sit there and pound it out, or some mixture of the two?
It's usually a mixture of the two. I'm a really big fan of dynamics, and I've talked about this, like, I mean, if you look up anything I've ever said, really, I'm really big on the idea of if you have a song that's just breakneck, like 100% all the time, going hard, people are going to get like a minute in and be like, cool, I've heard the whole song. What's the point? And at the same time, if you do something where it's just kind of slow and it never builds and it doesn't really go anywhere, you got like 30 seconds, people are going to be like, okay, and?
It's funny that you say that because, like, I saw, like, listening to y'all's music for the first time, I was like, wow, these guys have distinctively the feel of the bands that I, like, grew up listening to. Like, they've got that A7X, As I Lay Dying, Trivium kind of vibe.
Now, name
Now,
3 of my favorite bands, so I'd have to agree.
there you go. So, but when you talk about singing fast and people getting bored about a minute in, a song that immediately comes to my mind is Streets off of Avenged Sevenfold's first record. You start laughing the second I say that, dude.
I do.
What's your opinion of that
I
song?
love saying Seventh Trumpet. I will say I don't think it's their best record.
Yeah, no, like Streets. Well, see, Streets isn't even by Avenged Sevenfold.
Oh, I was forgetting it's like a punk cover.
Yeah, well, it's not even a punk cover. It was like M Shadow's first band or something.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah.
That's the record I pay the least attention to because, in all honesty, it is my least favorite. But I do know that it's just I don't pay much attention to that record because, like, I like Forgotten Faces and a couple other songs off that record. But a lot of it, I was kind of like, Waking the Fallen is their first real record in my mind.
I don't think any A7X fan will really dispute you on that, speaking as an A7X fan.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And not to mention, like, they only had 3/5 of the band at that time, which probably didn't help because, they didn't even have their full sound, really.
100%. So when it comes to this new record, and you, like, knowing your influences, you've got that, like, early, brand new metalcore kind of sound. You guys are in an awesome area for it. You're already in SoCal.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, living where you do played into your sound a whole lot?
Well, I think that would be a case-to-case basis because all of us kind of come from different areas. A couple of the band members were, born in Mexico, raised in LA. Our lead guitarist is from Iowa, and he moved out here a couple of years ago. I'm from San Diego. So just because of that, I think we all kind of bring those influences. But being in this area where metal and metalcore are kind of predominant to Southern California, I think it does definitely impact us because it's something where if we go to a show, more than likely we're going to see like 3 or 4 metalcore bands and then, maybe like a post-hardcore band or some thrash band or whatever. But it is definitely a big part of the scene. And for me, being from San Diego, I grew up on a lot of metalcore bands like Adestria, Killing the Messenger, and a lot of these local bands that I can say that if you're from San Diego, you know who they are. If you're not, you probably don't, and that's fine. But, I mean, obviously, As I Lay Dying is a huge name from San Diego, and I think that impacted me personally a lot. And all these other guys, I think it just varies because we're all from very different backgrounds.
Groovy.
Yeah.
When it comes to your writing on the record, do you think that your vocal lines have shifted in any tremendous way aside from the speed? Like, are you focusing more on harmony? Are you focusing on enunciation? Is there anything that has changed since recording The Wicked King Part 1?
Yeah, I'd have to say there's been a fair amount that has shifted. I've tried out a lot of different like new screaming styles. I kind of tried to almost take like, if you know, kind of classic era, Devil Wears Prada, that kind of stuff, early Miss May I, like a lot of those kind of really raw sounding screams. I tried to kind of incorporate more of that vibe, so it doesn't sound like we've just edited everything to living hell. Because I'm not a big proponent of that. There's definitely a lot more harmony on this side of the record, like just harmonies. There's a lot of 3-4 part harmonies and a couple of parts where it's two harmonies, but we double the octaves up, and we do kind of a lot of interesting, unique things on all the vocals. So we kind of it shifted in style for me, I guess, in the fact of I wanted to be really specific with what I wanted when we were tracking the second half, as opposed to the first half. At least that's what I was.
Is there anything else from the first half that, like, initially you wished you had done differently with the first half that is being translated into the second half?
I think that there's a couple different songs where we felt like either the intro could have been stronger in some way or anything could have happened a little differently, where once we kind of released part one and we'd already written and we're, pretty much done tracking part two, we kind of got to sit back and look at it and go like, you know what, I don't really know, or I don't really like how, what's a good example? I'm trying to think of a good one. Just little things of like the differentiation between drum patterns and like the single version of Haunted versus the album version, even something that small where it was like, recognizing that we really have to make sure that we're happy with everything before we put it out. Because I thought the album version, the drums were great, but it was a friend of mine who's a session drummer actually did that in the studio, and his style differed a lot more than what I had on the single version. And I loved it, but it just, we'd put it out and I was like, I do like the single version better, and just kind of sticking to our guns and really going with, we really need to do what we want. And I think that things like that led into, we have a song on the new record called As Faith Fades, which originally, the entire intro section was completely different in every way. And now it's this big orchestral intro that leads back into the song, and all the themes are kind of put into that one little intro thing. And I think recognizing that we had to do everything that made all of us happy, rather than thinking, this is good enough, I think that was a big shift. There was no abandonment to the degree that it had been before. I don't mean abandonment like we just kind of said, it's good enough. I mean more in the fact of after so many iterations of a song, you're going to want to change something every time. It doesn't matter. That's just the way it is. Eventually you have to kind of sit it down and say, this is great. I don't want to like mess this up. I cannot fuck this up.
If you keep going down that route, you get to the point where we are with Tool.
Yeah. When are we gonna get that album?
Supposedly next year.
They said that last year and the year before. I'm just saying.
They did, but we didn't get this much recording studio evidence last year. So it actually looks like it might finally happen this year.
Dude, if I get to hear some more Maynard vocals on anything or some more Danny Carey drums, life is set.
No, I can die happy. Like if this is their last record, I could die happy.
I'm with you. I thought Maynard put out a great record too with A Perfect Circle.
Oh yeah, no, Perfect Circle's new record was very, very tasty. It had like a distinctively different feel from anything they've ever done, but I think that just comes with age.
Yeah, I'd agree. They've aged like wine. Very fine.
Just like Maynard's wine.
Yeah, exactly. My joke, man. Damn.
Dude, I actually have a signed bottle of Maynard's wine that my uncle bought me for Christmas when I was...
Oh, one hell of an uncle, man.
Yeah, he's a hell of an uncle, especially considering I was like 17 at the time.
Yeah. Already, man. Tell him to come to a show.
Yeah. But hey, so speaking of like the Wicked King Part 1 and the Wicked King Part 2, they're separated by some time, and being a huge prog metal fan, that's pretty proggy to me. Are you guys Dream Theater fans at all?
Me, yes. I'm not like the biggest fan in the world, but I absolutely do love, and I get a lot of flack for the fact that I really love their record Octavarium.
Why would you get flack for that?
Because my drummer is very much a Dream Theater super fan. Mike Portnoy and Mike Mancini are both like some of his idols, and so when I say that, he's like, but they have so many better records, and I'm like, yeah, but that's the one that I like. Don't hate me.
I'm gonna, as a opposing Dream Theater super fan, I would like to request a duel with your drummer.
Dude, I can literally tell him to come. Well, I can't tell him to come on right now because I think he's teaching kids at Boys and Girls Club or something right now. Because he's a good guy or something, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
whatever good,
I know.
decent human beings are.
I know.
But no, we're gonna
That's.
fight, and he's gonna tell me exactly why he thinks Octavarium is not the
I know.
best Dream Theater record behind 6 Degrees. But we'll talk about that later.
You know what?
Um,
More than happy to talk about
but no, so like getting back to like the Wicked King Part One
it.
and Two, um, are you the lyricist?
The main lyricist, yeah. There's a couple of tracks where our guitarist does definitely do a fair amount as well.
Was the decision to return to the Wicked King a band decision, or was it something that you pushed for?
Well, the funny thing is, so originally it was actually written as one piece. And what ended up happening is after we'd written about, I mean, it was more than 13 originally, we cut out a lot of songs, but we realized that a lot of them ended up with the same themes, which were mainly oppression and tyranny, and kind of driven by that whole idea. And that's kind of what became the Wicked King, and that's why that's the name of the record. And we created this character, which we then incorporated into more songs and did all that with. But we realized through that process that there was really a big shift between the tone in about 6 and about 7 of the songs, which is part one and part two. The shift being that part one was a lot more like hope in the face of adversity. Like it's linked to things like trying to get over the death of one of my best friends at the end of high school when he killed himself, or like the idea of there is hope from America getting into this weird divide and us getting back to being a like one nation and not just freaking out and hating everybody for having a slightly different opinion. Um, it's very hopeful. And then part two was much more based in these darker, bigger, depressing themes of like betrayal by a close friend, um, literally hell. Hell is a theme there. If you didn't know, the song's called Inferno. I'm just saying, could be about hell. And you get into like this descent into madness that the character of the Wicked King has, where he ends up basically murdering all these people and doing all these things in hope of finding immortality, and saying that at the end, even if it were possible, you would still rot away. It would still be painful. You'd lose everything, everyone, every possible thing. That would be more a curse than anything. So it's all very dark. It's significantly darker than you'll get over these things. So that was the big shift between the two, and that's kind of why we separated it. So it wasn't so much a choice of I want to go back to this so much as it all kind of happened at the same time, and we ended up wanting to separate it into these two separate movements because we felt like the tone was different enough, but the songs went together well enough that they should be significantly put together as a part one and part two, because we feel like with part one you can go right into part two. It's the chapter that you left off on. You know, it's the second in the book series, if you will.
Okay. Well, returning real quick to one thing that you said in particular, and if you would rather not talk about this, then I completely understand that.
Go for it.
So you said that one of the songs relates to someone very close to you having ended their life.
Yes.
This is a question that I actually ask a lot of artists.
Mhm.
So we tell stories through our songs, and we frequently tell stories about other people. Um, what do you think makes it okay, or makes it a good cathartic thing to tell other people's stories through our own music?
I think the reason that it's so cathartic for me, at least, is because I feel like if I tell people how I felt and how I dealt with it and how I got through it, that if they're going through something like that, they can listen back and be like, A, I'm not the only one, but B, I can and I will get through this. And I think that's a big takeaway that I have from a lot of music I listened to growing up, because I listened to a lot of, metalcore, hardcore, emo, all that kind of stuff where I mean,
Like immediately you think of like I Won't See You Tonight Part 1 and 2, that kind of thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that growing up with that stuff and knowing that like that helped me is why I wanted to make a song like that. And that song is Haunted, by the way. That's it's like the first single that I think we put out as a band back last October. Yeah, I think that was right. Yeah. So that's at least for me why I do it, is I feel like firstly I want to be able to help anybody if I can. It's something that I think I struggled to talk about, so challenging myself to talk about it so openly was, again, really hard, but in my opinion, very necessary to grow as a person. So those would be the biggest things for me. That's why I do something like that.
That's really, really good to hear, and it's a good thing to hear that like other artists are definitely putting themselves out there
Yeah.
for the sake of their listener base.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Wicked King Part 2, why would you say? So you said you wrote the Wicked King Part 1 and 2 as an initial group of songs.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so were all the songs written chronologically, or did you write a bunch and you were like, these ones are hopeful, these ones are dark, let's split them?
The latter. We wrote a lot of songs. I came up with at least, I don't know, 40, 50 instrumental demos. And Will came in with a solid like 20, 30. And then all the guys we all worked on them together. And that's kind of what everything worked together to become, was these songs that we liked the best. And once we realized that they had this kind of shift in lyrical content between the two parts, that's when we separated it. And we're like, oh, well, it's kind of weird that all of these are exactly like this. And these are nothing like that. They're the exact opposite. And so because of that, we kind of wanted to separate that so people could kind of notice that. And it just felt like it was a smarter shift also when it came to things like marketing. Just because in this day and age, as much as it is unfortunate, the album is kind of dying. Like the long form release seems to be dying. And I wanted to have something where it'd be slightly more digestible and slightly more easy to access than a lot of what we could have released as just one record. And so that was a big part of it too. We wanted to have something where people would actually treasure all these songs that we'd worked so hard on, rather than just kind of saying, you know what, let's see what happens, let's see what sticks.
I definitely think that's a smart marketing decision, just from the point, especially of like a new band.
Yeah.
Like a double record as your first album, most people would just be like, this is a lot to digest. I'm gonna hold back. So
Exactly.
I think you guys definitely made the right decision there. But I'm beyond excited to hear this second record.
Just
when
you wait.
you spoke of you writing this many songs, so you are a multi-instrumentalist, you're not just a vocalist?
Yeah, I actually, for this record, because our drummer had not actually come into the band yet, I did write all the drums, and then we had a buddy of ours, AJ Beyond is his name, do all the drumming from his studio. He was a session artist for it, and he absolutely slayed it, and I gotta give him props because I gave him a lot of stuff and just said kind of go with it, and he did. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But yeah, so for this record, I wrote all the drums. I wrote a majority of the vocals and the lyrics, and then Will wrote a majority. That's our lead guitarist, Will Ash. He wrote a majority of the guitar and the bass, obviously, as well as a lot of the orchestral compositions are mainly, actually no, pretty much all him. I might have been like, what about this piano note? But that's literally it. So because of that, I am a multi-instrumentalist, but I am not the only. Oh no, James Hetfield just fell down.
Oh no.
I know.
Geralt will save him.
I know. I
I
hope
just
so.
held up my own Geralt vinyl pop from The Witcher, so he's right there.
This one.
Oh my god, dude, hold him up to the camera real quick.
He does have. I accidentally tipped him over and he lost his sword, but I do have him.
It's
He's my
okay.
boy. He's my
Dude,
boy.
fantastic. I have a
Oh, yeah.
feeling we're gonna keep in touch after this interview.
I hope so. I hope so.
You can't see it, but I've got some Witcher tats on my arm that I'll show you later.
Dude, that's rad as hell. I'm so about it. Fuck yeah.
What were
you're
we talking about? Multi-instrumentalist.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Long story short, background is kind of all over the place. I ended up playing drums drums second after I started singing, because my dad had like a midlife crisis and decided to get a drum kit. He got like a just totally shitty Pearl Soundcheck fucking drum kit with just, they were like, I think they were like Sabian V8s, like the worst sounding cymbals possible. But I was like, 14, and it was like, ooh, I get to hit shit? I'm so fucking down. Yeah, like literally, that was me as a child. And my dad would get really angry at me and actually started making me pay for my own drumsticks after like 3 weeks because I broke like 7 pairs of drumsticks. I still hit, I think every time I get behind a drum kit with the guys, for just jamming for fun, because we'll switch instruments and do whatever to make, cool sounds, because people write and do things differently. They'll still just say I hit like a caveman, which, yeah. I mean, when you grow up watching The Rev and like Dave Grohl and John Dolmayan from System, like, you're gonna hit super hard.
Especially John Delmayan, I think. I mean, that dude.
Yeah. He's
of all the drummers I know, that man's a caveman.
Yeah, dude. I met him once. He's just stone-faced and looks like a caveman. Like, just nothing. Nothing. I thought I was going to die when I said hello, honestly. Not because he's rude or anything. He just was like, the entire time.
It's like there's nothing going on there, but there's just a constant beat.
Exactly. I'm like, I feel like there's just like a metronome going in his head, just... And there's nothing else. That's the whole thing.
Well, when it comes to your composition, like, so you're a vocalist and drummer. Are you writing with guitar parts in mind, or is it mostly a
Yeah.
these are the bass chords and these are the vocal melodies I'm singing over them?
It depends. So I write in a bunch of different ways, as do again all the guys in the band. I don't want to even pretend I'm the only songwriter because I'm not in any way. But with any of those guys, it starts from any different way. For me, normally I will have a drum beat or a vocal melody or a riff, and I'll base the song around that idea. So, like for instance, our song off the first record, "Burn the Throne," um, I wrote the intro to that as well as I wrote part of the verse, and that whole thing was tied just with like basically it was a weird influence of like Thrice and System of a Down. If you really listen for it, you'll definitely hear it. But I'll just sit down, and that all started off with just two riffs, which is the verse riff and the opening little riff, which is just like a droning like G chord with a bunch of just low G going through it. It's super simple, but I love the hell out of it. And I'll do something like that, or a song like Inferno actually started with two things. That intro, it started with the drum thing, the like little like kick thing, the like, which when you say drums, you will inevitably sound like an idiot no matter what you're doing. It's just goes. Yeah, exactly. You just sound like you're, I don't know, Donnie from Wild Thornberries or something. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. But yeah, so that one started with the drums, and then a song like Legacy. Will sent me the entire guitar parts. I wrote like part of the drum parts, and then I just worked with some vocal melodies that I immediately had, and that's how that one came to be. So every single song, it really differs. Like there's one or two songs where it started with like a simple vocal melody, like Haunted started with the drum, or it was just the bass chords, the power chords that are the rhythm guitar, and me just singing the chorus melody, and then I wrote the rest around that. So it all varies, and then of course, I sent it to Will, and he adds like a bunch of cool harmonies and all this crazy shreddy stuff, and he made it sound way better. But yeah,
Dope.
it's always different. Literally every song, completely different, which I think works to our advantage because I feel personally, and I hope I'm not being cocky in saying this, that none of our songs, they feel like none of them sound the same.
Yeah, no, and that's an incredible feeling to have, like especially as a songwriter, knowing that like you've got that depth of variety.
Absolutely. That's also the benefit of working in a band where there's not only one songwriter, I think. I love when bands are willing to actually collaborate. It's great when you have one songwriter, so it's super conducive, but at the same time, like, I like variety.
It's like the merit of like Opeth and the Faceless versus bands like Dream Theater and Avenged Sevenfold.
Exactly. Like, I love both sides of that, and we actually get a lot of flack because there's only a couple Opeth records I don't really listen to, and one of them happens to be the song that has it's Damnation and Deliverance or something like that, like something super similar to a song title that we have.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's one of the records I don't know very well. Shit.
It's actually two records.
Yes. Yeah. It's damn it. What is it? Because I know Opeth for like Lotus Eater and like anything else.
Watershed.
Oh.
Watershed is what Lotus Eater is off of, and that was my first Opeth record.
Oh man, I know them mainly by songs more than I do records, which I feel bad about because they're a prog band, which obviously you should listen to the records of.
No worries, bro. I mean, like with something like Watershed, I mean, like the tracks speak for themselves. My favorite track off that one is Hessian Peel, so I mean, like, it's all standalone. But getting back to y'all's new record, when it comes to great conversation begets great conversation.
Totally.
When you got something like The Wicked King Part 1 and 2, as one of the primary lyricists, is there kind of a story that you try to build? Like, I know when my friends and I are playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, we build these humongous stories, and sometimes those stories can spill across into other things. Is there anything you guys have ever had spill off into your music?
Thematically, I don't know if I would really say it did too much. Like, all these lyrics were all kind of made unintentionally with the same ideas in mind, and then we refined them once we realized that they were all there. So it's kind of hard to say what influenced and what didn't, because the big turning point for us, I think, was with the lyrics and all that, was when we got our first album's artwork from my buddy Ian. He goes by the stage name of Gray Eldridge. He's awesome. But when he did that, we kind of had this shift of mind of like, oh, damn, you know what? A lot of these things kind of revolve around what he's got on there. with the Wicked King himself, and these themes of like tyranny and oppression. And from there, we kind of honed it in. There wasn't really any moment where, something like D&D bled in. Although I will say, every campaign I've ever played, I have been a bard, and I think that shows a lot in our music, in so many ways.
I geeked out over that statement.
I mean, it's real, man. It's true. I just started a new campaign for the first time since like high school because I hadn't done it in forever, and I've got all my cantrips and all my little spells coming down. I just got to like level 3. I literally just started like a couple weeks back. It's a good time.
Dope.
Oh yeah, but yeah. Anyways, getting back to the actual music that I should be talking about. Geek out over stuff. There wasn't really anything that was specific to influence us lyrically on a lot of it, except for events that happened to us. Obviously, with songs like "Haunted," it was about a good friend of mine killing himself and dealing with that. So that one was obviously very personal. We have that song "As Faith Fades," which Will had a heavier hand in the lyric writing of, because originally we had a completely different lyric set. But then I'm not going to name any names or talk any shit or do any dramatic things. But a really good friend of ours kind of just straight up betrayed us in a couple of moves in the industry and all these things, and we're just really, really hurt by it. So obviously, when that happens, you write a song when you're pissed off. And that's what happened there. And then we have things where, like, I used to be like a comedian and a playwright and do all these other creative things outside of music as well. And Inferno was really influenced by when I wrote a play that was revolving around the concept of death, heaven, hell, and purgatory. And I had gone back and I'd read the first book of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, known as Inferno. And yeah, so because of that, obviously that influenced that. So it's more random happenstance, I'd say, than it was us really trying to adhere to any outside influence in particular.
Okay, fantastic. We've talked a lot about the record. Let's talk about some live performances real quick. I know you guys have a tour coming up, and unfortunately, very unfortunately, there is no Richmond show.
I know. Soon.
But where are some cities, some like bigger cities that you can tell our viewers you are hitting?
Sure. We are, let's see, what are the good ones? Eugene, Oregon. Portland, I swear, will come to you soon, just not quite yet. Seattle. Boise, Idaho. Phoenix, Arizona. Las Vegas, Nevada. San Diego, which, woo, hometown show. Very excited about that. Los Angeles. And I think those are all the bigger cities. We're also hitting somewhere outside of Fresno called Tular, which is basically a Fresno suburb of sorts, I've been told, but it's not Fresno, so I don't want to tell people it's Fresno because it's a little farther out.
That's very, very sensible of you.
I don't want them to feel bad.
Well, I like to keep my interviews short and sweet, and this has been a fantastic interview. So let's go ahead and ask you one more question.
Do it.
One more after that, and then we will wrap this up. So, if you could write the score to any book that you know does not have a score, what would it be and why? Or if you could rewrite the score to a video game.
Oh, to a video. See, I like video game scores though. I don't care if it's 8-bit or it's orchestral. It's beautiful. And honestly, Will's a giant fan of a lot of that stuff, so he showed me a lot of cool stuff too. Because like I'm a what's the word? A casual gamer. I play every once in a while. Like I'm playing.
You're a heckin' casual.
Exactly. I am, as it once was said, a noob with 2 zeros.
Oh Jesus, I'm sorry.
I know. It's a tough life, but somebody's
got to be an 8.
I don't want to go into that, but maybe it was.
Oh, I am so sorry, sir.
It's okay.
What book would you have written the score to, if you could?
Oh, and if I could, well, firstly, I would love to rewrite the score to fucking Aragon, because it was so garbage that it still haunts me and my nightmares.
Yep.
To this day.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Aragon, Eldest Bringer, that whole thing. I'd love to do it for that. Otherwise, there's a couple of I would love to do. Russell Brand has a book called My Bookie Book, and I know it sounds weird, but knowing Russell Brand's taste in music and his weird kind of tendency to always veer toward weird glammy kind of poppy old school 80s metal and rock and kind of hard rock stuff, I'd love to challenge myself to write a book or the score to a book with something like that, just to be you got to have that blend of the super seriousness of where he talks about drug and sex addiction, but also being on TV, being a fucking rock star and shit. I think that'd be a bunch of fun to write to.
Dope. Well, Geordy, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. If you ever come to Richmond, you've got a place that you and your band can have a shower and some
Dude, thank
beer.
you. That's the thing. Yeah. I do I know we never talked about beer.
We'll talk about beer real quick. What's your favorite beer style?
Favorite beer? Fuck. Okay, so I used to live in Germany. Fun fact. And there is a very specific beer to West Germany called Kolsch. I will drink that shit like it's water. Because it's fantastic, and as much as American beer is not bad, they're doing it better.
Now, question: because Germany drinks so much beer, is the ABV lower there, or do Germans?
Germans just go hard, dude.
They just go hard.
They just go really. They drink a lot of fucking beer. It's great. But if you go out with them, they also do drink a lot of pretty much anything else. It's just they like alcohol.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything else that our viewers and your fans need to know about the Crown Remnant?
I mean, Crown the Remnant's not a bad name either.
Verb the noun.
God damn it.
Oh,
it's 2008.
But no, luckily you guys are not verb the noun. You are the noun. So what do people need to know about the Crown Remnant right now?
We're probably coming to a city near you. We have a new record called The Wicked King Part 2 that's coming out on January 18th, 2019. Outside of that, if you do want to keep in contact with us, which I would recommend because we try to be friendly and nice people, sometimes funny even, I would say you want to follow us on Instagram at The Crown Remnant, Twitter at The Crown Remnant. At The Crown Remnant, apparently neither of us can talk today. Facebook, The Crown Remnant, and literally any other medium, The Crown Remnant, as well as www.crownremnant.com. Also, people should probably keep paying attention to you and watching the show because it's fucking rad.
Dude, I appreciate that. I don't think I've ever had someone that I interviewed say that, so that is dope as hell. Thank you.
Gotta be honest, man. Like, I've had a fair amount of interviews and nobody's bad, but you're just better.
Listen to this man.
Yeah, right?
Listen to this man right here.
This fucking guy.
All right.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That's it from me. Thank you for having me.
This has been Geordy with the Crown Remnant. You all tune in later. This has been WDCE 90.1 FM, and you, as always, stay brutal.